Hello, my sweet and precious students. Welcome back. We are going to be talking today about converting between decimals and fractions. So we're going to just jump right into this. Guys, if you are in my class, you need to be writing these things down in your notes. Yes? Okay. First things first, this is what I want you to write down. 17 over 100. This is 17 hundredths. The way we would read that as a decimal is 17 hundredths. We put it over like this. If I have 61 over 100, folks, same idea, 0.61 or 61 hundredths. If I have 80 over 100, if I have this is 0.80 or 80 hundredths, but we don't really say that. We lob this extra zero off and we say 8 tenths, 8 tenths. And that's the same because we can lob these zeros off and we have 8 over 10, right? Now, with that said, if I have 8 over 100, this is not 0.8, this is 0.08, 0.08. So make sure you have those examples written down. Basically, if you have something over 100, you can easily put it into a decimal. So what does that mean for you? Well, we've got some good news. Along with that same thing, we're going to talk about factors of factors of 100. So factors of 100. We have 1 times 100. 2 times 50, not 3, but 4 times 25, 5 times 20, and then 10 times 10. Folks, if a fraction ends with one of those numbers, you can pretty easily get it into a fraction that is over 100, therefore you can convert it. For example, if I have 7 over 25, let's put that into a fraction over 100. Well, 25, if I multiply that by 4, I get 100. So if I multiply it by 4 on the bottom, I'm going to need to multiply it by 4 up here. I get 28. So 7 over 25 as a decimal is 0.28 or 28 hundredths, just like we did here. If I have 3 over 5, that's pretty easy to get into 100. What I can do, what do I need to multiply 5 by to get 100? Take a look at our handy chart over here, 20. Multiply this by 20, because I did it on the bottom, I'm going to do it on the top, I get 60. So this is going to be 6 tenths. Remember, we can lob these zeros off and it's 6 tenths, 6 tenths. Same idea if I have 1 over 4, 1 over 4. This is actually just a good one to memorize, just to have it, just to know it. But 4 times 25 gives me 100. 1 times 25 gives me 25. Therefore, 1/4 as a decimal is 0.25 or 25 hundredths, 25 hundredths. All right, so let's talk about a couple of these other ones. Sometimes it does not work out in your favor that we have something that easily, and so I'm gonna use my calculator here just for a second to make sure that I get a good one. Yeah, so let's say we have 7 over 8. Unfortunately, 8 does not evenly go into 100 here, right? It does not go in, so we can't use that method. What we end up having to do for 7 over 8 is we're going to have to divide. So we take that 7 that's on top and we put that underneath our table here. The 8 is on bottom, it goes on the outside here. Now remember, if a decimal is not shown, it's at the end. So right here we have a decimal. 8 does not go into 7, it can't. So we're going to throw 0 here, but I'm going to bring this decimal up to here. However, 8 goes into 70 8 times. 8 times 8 gives me 64. 6. And when I subtract here, I bring down another 0. So 8 goes into 60 7 times, right? 7 times 8 gives me 56. Subtract here, 60 minus 56 gives me 4. And when I subtract, I also bring down. Got 40. 8 goes into 40 5 times. So 7/8 as a decimal is 0.875. You can always use this long division method to turn something from a decimal into a fraction. However, if it has a base that is a factor of 100, it's a lot easier just to turn it into a fraction that is over 100, because that makes it a lot easier to turn it into a decimal. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, let's look at some of these examples here. Example number 1, this says 0.125, we need to turn this into a fraction. I want you to remember how to say your decimals correctly. It is 125 thousandths. So if you say your decimal correctly out loud, it's telling you exactly how to write it as a fraction. 125 thousandths. So it's going to be over 1,000. Another way to remember that, there are 1, 2, 3 decimals behind, or 3 digits behind our decimal here, which means we need to have 3 zeros here. However, anytime you need to, or anytime we have a fraction, we always have to reduce. And the reason I'm doing this is because I graded your tests, y'all, and you know how many times I had to write the word reduce? I bought my own stamp. Look at this. It says, oh, you can't even see it. Reduce. I don't know what I'm doing here. Reduce. Look at that stamp. Reduce. And it's got a little sad face because you didn't reduce your fractions. So if you see that on your paper, guys, it's because you didn't reduce your fractions. So we're going to reduce here. We know that we can divide these both by 5 because they end in a 5 and a 0. So using our calculator here, we're going to do 125 divided by 5. That gives me 25. Sure enough, if I had 5 quarters, I'd have $1.25. Dividing this by 5 is going to, 1,000 divided by 5 gives me 200. Well, I can divide by 5 again, right? So divide this guy by 5. Divide this by 5. Up top, I'm going to be getting 5. Oops, sorry, I'm a little crooked there. Down below, I get 5. So 20 divided by 5 is 4. So 200 divided by 5 is 40. Well, I can divide by 5 again. Let's do it again. This gives me 1 over 8. 1 over 8. Okay. So let's talk about these numbers that are a little bit larger. So we have example number 2. Oops, let me make sure I get this nice and lined up. There we go. Example number 2. This one says, write 11 and 42 hundredths as a mixed number. Well, guys, this 11 is a whole number, so that stays out in the front. Now, if I were to deal with that 0.42 or 42 hundredths separately, it would be 42 over 100, 42 over 100. But guys, reduce your fraction. We can reduce both these by dividing them by 2 because they both end in an even number. So let's divide by 2, divide by 2. 40 divided by 2 is 20. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the top here is going to be 21. On the bottom, we take 100, we cut it in half, we get 50. So our answer for this guy back over here is 11 and 42 hundredths is 11 and 21 over 50. 11 and 21 over 50. All right, so let's look at example number 3. We have, write each of these numbers as a decimal number. We're going to start with A. 23 over 100. It's your lucky day when something's over 100. It's just going to be 23 hundredths. B. 7 over 4. Well, let's use my nifty trick that we did before because 4 is a factor of 100, right? So let's put it over 100. We multiply 4 times 25 to get 100. So if we do it on the bottom, we sure as heck got to do it at the top there. So 25 times 7 gives me 175. Now notice 175 is greater than 100. Now back here, this is greater too. There were 2 ways of doing this. What we could do now is say, okay, there is 1 whole 1, and then we have 75 over 100, right? We could do that. And then we would have to reduce this down. Think if you have 75 cents, you have 3 quarters out of 4. This is a good one to memorize. 75 over 100 is just going to be 1 3/4. Divide the top by 70 or by 25, you get 3. Divide the bottom by 25, you get 4. Another way for us to have done this is way back over here where it said 7/4. What we could have done then is turn it into a mixed number. 4 goes into 7 one time with a remainder of 3. Now 3 over 4, again, we can turn that into a decimal by, let's just do some side work here. 3 over 4 equals over 100. Multiply this times 25 to get 100. Multiply this times 25 to get 75. And that will give us 3 and, oh, I should have backed up here. It'll give us 1.75. And I noticed that I turned this back into a mixed number. I shouldn't have. We were supposed to be putting it in decimals. But 75 over 100, we know, is going to give us 0.75. So 75 hundredths. So that's just 2 different ways of doing that. I lose, my ADD kicks in halfway through and I forget what I'm doing. So I apologize. All right, for C, let me see. 3 4/5. 3 4/5. Okay, this time I'll turn it into a decimal. This is going to be 3, and then we've got to put something over. We can put this over 100. 5 times 20 will give me 100. 4 times 20 gives me 8. right? So that's 80. Again, we can lob these zeros off here, and so we have 8/10. So this is going to equal 3 and 8/10, just like that, okay? Okay, hold on one sec here. All right, so 2/3. Guys, some of these decimals you should just memorize, right? Let's back up and talk about that. The ones that you should memorize, make a note in your book somewhere. 1/4 equals 0.25 or 25 hundredths. 1/2 equals 0.5. 3 out of 4, think if you have 3/4 out of 4, you have 75 cents. Another good one to memorize, 1/3 is 0.3 with a line over the top, repeating. 2/3 is 0.6 with a line over the top, because if we did the division with this, we would get 0.6. These are ones that you should just memorize because I think it's a lot easier. Let's see about doing, all right, so that was D. For the next one, we're gonna do, the practice, I'm sorry. On page 263, there are some practice problems at the bottom, A through K, I believe. Yeah, A through K. Go ahead and pause the video, make sure you've done those correctly, and then come on back. All right, so for A, we have 0.24. Turn this into a fraction. We gotta turn this guy into a fraction, we gotta reduce it. So in that case, we're gonna have 24/100, because this is 24 hundredths, right? There's 2 digits behind the decimal, right? Both of these are even, so let's just cut those in half. If we divide by 2, we end up with 12/50. Oh, those are both even too, so let's cut them in half again. Divide by 2, we end up with 6/25 for A. For B, we have 45 and 6/10. 45 and 6/10. Well, that whole number, we're not gonna mess around with that. That's 45, and then 6/10 means it's just gonna be 6/10. We've got to reduce these. Both of these are even. So if we divide by 2, I end up with 45 and 3/5. 45 and 3/5. Let's look at C. 2.375. This guy is going to be a little bit trickier because we have 2, but then we have 375 thousandths. 375 thousandths, which means these are both end in a 5 or a 0. So we're going to divide by 5, and we end up with 2 and 375. Actually, I won't even do the 2 part yet. Just let's reduce it all the way so that we know. So 375, divide that by 5, we end up with 75. And then 1,000 divided by 5, well, 10 divided by 5 is going to be 2, right? And then 100 would be 20, so this is going to be 200. Again, those are 5s and 0s, so let's divide by 5, okay, so we've got 15 upstairs, and then 200 divided by 5 is going to give me 40, right? So 15, and I did that because 20 divided by 5 is going to be 4, and so 200 divided by 5 is 4 with a 0. Again, we got to divide these guys by 5, and I end up with 3/8 with an 8 on the bottom because I'm dividing by 5, dividing by 5. So come all the way back over here. The answer is 2 and 3/8. 2 and 3/8. You got to get real good at reducing those fractions, guys. I've been harping on that since the beginning. Reduce those fractions. All right. So that was C. Let's look at D. Okay, 23/4. We're going to turn this guy into a decimal. First things first, let's turn it into a mixed number. I think that's probably the easiest. So 4, I don't know, I'm making things up as I go along. So we're going to do 4 on the outside, 23. 4 goes into 23 5 times with a remainder of 3, so it's 5 and 3/4. 5 and 3/4. Now we've got to turn this into a decimal. Remember, 3/4 is one you need to memorize. 3/4, if you have 3/4 out of 4 total quarters, you have 75 cents. Okay, 75 cents. E, 4 and 3/5. 4 and 3/5. Yes, when we see something on the bottom that is a multiple of 100, our day is good. We got this. We're going to put this over 100. 5 times 20 will give me 100. 3 times 20 gives me 60. So really what this is 4 and 60 over 100. Let's just make it easier. We're going to lob those zeros off. 6/10 means we get 4 and 6/10, just like that. Let's do F here. We have 5 over 8. 5 over 8. Okay, so this one doesn't end in a 100, right? So we can't, or doesn't end in a multiple of 100. So we can't do our easy peasy way of doing this. We're gonna actually have to do long division. This is on top of the table, so it's gonna go under the table here, just like that. I noticed I added a decimal there because we're gonna need that because 8 does not evenly go into 5. We're gonna bring our decimal up to here. 8, however, does go into 50. 4, 5, 6 times 8. Yeah, 6 times 8 gives me 48. That's 2. And when I subtract, I bring down, so let's throw another 0 here. 8 goes into 20 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract, and when I subtract there, I also bring down another 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times. So 5 over 8 equals 625 thousandths. 625 thousandths. All right, so you can hear my dog in the background. He's like, I want to go outside. Let's go play. And I'm like, no, I have to record these. I forgot. H, 8%. 8%. Oh, I didn't realize I missed those examples. I'm so sorry. So for these guys right here, how many dots are there in a percent sign? There are 2. So to turn this into a fraction, it goes 8 over 100. Notice there are 2 zeros, just like there are 2 zeros here. That's how we remember it. But it is a fraction. You gotta reduce it. Cut it in half. I get 4 over 50. Cut it in half again, I get 2 over 25. So, and that's as far as we can go with it. So 8% is 2 over 25. Let's try that again. So I is 12.5%. Again, how many dots are there in a percent sign? There are 2, which means we're going to put 12.5 over 100. But we can't have a decimal, and we did 100 because there are 2 dots, right? But we can't have a decimal within our fraction, so we need to get rid of that decimal by doubling it. If we double this guy, or actually not even by doubling it, I think the better way to do this, move that decimal over 1 spot, but what I do up there, I have to do on the bottom down here. So that 12.5 over 100 becomes 125 over 1,000. 1,000, but it's a fraction and you have to reduce it. Divide by 5, divide by 5. I end up with, upstairs I'll have, so we've got, make sure I can, I wanted to just double check something, sorry. Okay, so if we do, yeah, I think that's the best way to do that. If you move the decimal over, I think that'll be better. So 125 divided by 5 will give me 25, because if you have 5 quarters, you have $1.25, right? 1,000 divided by 5 is going to give me 200, because 10 divided by 5 is 2. 100 divided by 5 is 20. 1,000 divided by 5 gives me 200. But again, we can keep reducing that. So if I divide by 5, upstairs I have 5, downstairs 20 divided by 5 is 4. So 200 divided by 5 is 4 with a 0. I can still reduce. Divide by 5, I end up with 1 upstairs and 8 downstairs. 1 upstairs and 8 downstairs. So 12.5% as a fraction is 1 over 8. 1 over 8. All right, let's talk about J is 150%. 150%. 150%. Okay, so there are 2 dots in a percent sign. So we have 2 zeros. So this is going to be 150 over 100. Notice this is an improper fraction. Well, first things first, let's log off our zeros to make our life easier. 15 over 10. 15 over 10. Well, we can reduce this before we go turning it into a mixed number. If we divide the top by 5 and the bottom, we get 3 over 2. Now, we could leave it as that, or we could put it as a mixed number. 2 goes into 3 one time. 2 times 1 is 2, and plus 1 more would give us 3. So 150%, 1.5. Okay. 6.5%. 6.5%. Well, this is why I say some of those ones are really important to memorize. 1/2 we know as a decimal is 0.5, right? So this is 6.5, and there are 2 dots and a percent sign, so there are 2 100ths on the bottom. But we can't have a decimal, so we're gonna move this over, and we have to move this decimal over. So now what we have is 65 over 1,000, 65 over 1,000. Both of those end in a 5 and a 0, so if we divide the top by 5 and divide the bottom by 5, we end up with 65 divided by 5 is 13. On the bottom, we end up with 200 because 10 divided by 5 gives us 2, divided by 100 would give us 20, divided by 1,000 would give us 200. So 6.5% is 13 over 200. All right, guys, hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions, let me know. There are some other examples that you can look at that I skipped by mistake on the percent ones. So if you have any questions, check those out. Otherwise, let me know in class. Thanks, guys.